All right. Welcome back, everybody. Let's take two on that. I apologize. We got knocked off of our live session. So we're going to start all over. So welcome back, everybody. Today is Thursday, October 14th, 2021. And we are going to talk today about tips on successful enrollment procedures. So once again, today's topic is not going to be about building enrollment or marketing. Today's webinar is going to be about the procedures for collecting enrollment paperwork and being successful with child care licensing and your families. For those of you that this is your first time joining us, once again, we will post a link at the end of the webinar today for you to complete your online worksheet. It does not cost anything for you to listen and watch the Facebook Live, but if you want a certificate of completion at the end of the day, then you will complete the online worksheet, and that is $5 for your 1 hour of instructor-led training. That's right, it's instructor-led. If you are participating live today, you have the opportunity to interact with me. You can type in questions or make comments on the comment section of Facebook Live. You can also throw me emojis there in the bottom right-hand corner. If you hear something that you like, throw me a smiley face or a heart or whatever that may be. All right, but because you have the opportunity to interact in a timely manner, that makes this instructor-led with child care licensing. Now, if you're watching the recorded video, then that would be self-instructional material with licensing. All right, so let's go ahead and get started since we're on our take two and we're already 7 minutes into this. Like I said, I am sharing my screen today, so you got a little bit of a presentation rather than just looking at my face. So that's something new and exciting for us. All right, so when we talk about tips on successful enrollment procedures, for me, when we talk about compliance with child care regulations, it's a really big trigger for me when I see programs get cited for paperwork. There really should be no reason why anyone gets cited for paperwork. It should be one of the easiest things that we do in our program. So, make sure today is going to be all about collecting all of the required paperwork that is needed for child care licensing, and then being done with it so that you don't have to worry about it again. When you are spending a lot of time chasing documents, there's a lot of other things that we should be doing rather than trying to get parents to complete paperwork. It should be very, very simple. All enrollment paperwork is completed and turned in prior to the child starting. Easy breezy, done. And so, normally I would say something like easier said than done. This one should be easy. It's pretty cut and dry right there. All right. I noticed that someone said something about technical issues. We did get knocked off of Facebook Live. I got us back on. If you're having any additional technical issues, my recommendation is for you to be patient and breathe, and eventually things will work itself out. With technical issues in the internet, it is what it is. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that we want to be aware of when it comes to collecting records for children. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about when you are giving a tour to a prospective family, a portion of your tour should be sitting down with the family and going over the enrollment paperwork. Letting the parent know exactly what needs to be completed and turned in. Don't just hand them the folder of paperwork and assume that they know what they should complete. I like to go through this packet form by form. If you notice anything on the tour that might be a red flag, then you would highlight or specifically point out all areas of the enrollment paperwork that needs to be completed. So, for example, they say something like, well, dad's not in the picture. All right. Then when we get to the admissions information, making sure that you point out that, biological father's name, any information they have on them, or if there is a court order on file, making sure that you get copies of those court orders. All right. So the parent can't just dictate who can and cannot pick up when it's a biological parent situation. Dad would have a legal right to access that child if he can prove that he is the biological father in the absence of a court order. Now, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on in the workshop. I don't want to go into too much detail because it'll take us down a rabbit hole that we will stay down for an hour. I do have a webinar on custody issues that you can go back and you can watch if you want more information on that particular topic. All right. But another example, if during the tour the family says something about my child is allergic to pineapples, all right, then pointing out the food allergy emergency plan would be very important in that situation. And addressing that the food allergy emergency plan must be completed and signed by a healthcare professional. And again, I would say this needs to be turned in prior to the child starting in your program. Now, that orientation with the parent and going over that paperwork is extremely helpful. And once again, being a little assertive that all enrollment paperwork must be completed entirely and turned in prior to the child starting. My recommendation to you, and this is something that we've been doing for probably about 6 or 7 years now, and it has made a huge difference in the operation of the program. We require parents to turn in enrollment paperwork at least 3 business days prior to the child starting. All right? That way, we have time to review the paperwork, go through it, make sure that it's complete. If there's anything questionable, we have time to ask about it. We can create the child's files, we can get the child into the computer, but most importantly, we have time to communicate with the classroom teacher that they have a new child starting on Monday, and then that teacher can get ready for the child's arrival, get their cubby ready, get their name on the birthday board, all of those type of things. And for those of you that are administrators, I just want to remind you what it was like when it was Monday morning and your director walked into your classroom and said, oh, by the way, you have a new child starting today. And that feeling of frustration and anxiety when you're blindsided by this new child. All right, that's not a whole lot of fun there. So giving them the appropriate amount of time to prepare for that child, that's nice. All right, that's really nice right there. So 3 business days is what I recommend. When you're creating the child's files, I always like to recommend that you have 3 different files that you create for the child. The first one, which I would normally put in like a blue file folder, kind of like what you see on the screen right there, is what I would like to call a licensing file. So all of the documents that you see listed, the enrollment agreement, the admissions information, the statement of the child's health, immunization records, TB testing if applicable in your area, food allergy emergency plan if applicable, and your infant sleep exception form if applicable. These are all required documents from child care licensing. We're going to put those in one file folder and we're going to label it our licensing file for that child. Then I like to create a second folder, which is normally red, that I like to call our confidential file. There are certain documents that we collect that has nothing to do with licensing, all right? And we like to keep those separate from licensing for a couple of different reasons. This would be something like tuition agreement, so how much the parent is paying tuition, court orders or custody agreements, those type of things, anecdotal records, developmental milestone checklist. These would all be documents that is not required by licensing, but they are critical documents that we collect in our program. We're going to put those in our confidential file, and that's going to be kept in a separate location from your licensing file. So sometimes I'll see people, just create one of those little green divider things, and they'll have like the blue file and the yellow file back to back. Y'all, that defeats the purpose, all right? We keep the confidential file in a completely separate filing cabinet than the licensing file. And then if you participate in the federal food program, then there would be a third file that we would create for that child with the food program paperwork. So your income eligibility forms, your enrollment paperwork for CACFP. We would keep that separate from licensing and from confidential. Now, if you don't participate in the food program, then you don't have to worry about that particular file. All right. Thank you, Pat, for that compliment. I definitely appreciate that. And if there's any other topics that y'all would like to see us do here at Tim at 10, I would love your recommendations. So you can shoot me a message on Facebook or send me an email, tim@timthetrainer.com. I love topic suggestions. And then if I've already done that topic, then I can point you to it. Or maybe it's time for a refresher. So that happens from time to time. All right. So once again, the records that are required by licensing, you can see there on your screen. We're going to kind of go through each one of these. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the data that's entered on each of these forms. They're pretty self-explanatory, but I am going to talk about some of the hot topics and things that people are commonly cited. So once again, I want to set you up for success and have good enrollment procedures in place to prevent licensing issues. And typically, the items that we get cited for by licensing, are the items that parents don't want to complete, honestly. All right. Let me go ahead and just say this. If a parent refuses to complete any part of your enrollment paperwork, or if they refuse to sign any one of your documents, then they don't get to start. Okay, it's once again, this is pretty cut and dry, pretty easy breezy. If they refuse to complete the paperwork or they refuse to sign it, you don't enroll them. All right, they don't get to start. If they don't like your rules, they can go play somewhere else. So it's pretty easy right there. All right. Now let's talk about the enrollment agreement right here. Now licensing does specify that we need to have an enrollment agreement. Typically, this is part of your admissions paperwork. As far as the financial agreement is concerned, I do like to keep that in the confidential file rather in the licensing file, because how much money the parent pays you for tuition and any additional fees that you charge that parent are really none of licensing their business. All right. So if you ever have a licensing rep that starts asking you about tuition or additional fees, y'all, that's none of their business. All right. Especially if they start giving you a hard time, that's when you need to respectfully and professionally pick up the phone and call their supervisor. Because that's out of their jurisdiction right there. Now, I do have a sample copy of a financial agreement that you can see there on the screen. If you want to see the actual document right there, that is available in our Child Care Survival Guide that is located on my website, timthetrainer.com. If you want access to that document, but you can kind of see a sample. It's really not for you to read, it's just kind of a visual, but I do like to have anything financial in writing signed by the parent. And anytime you make changes to their tuition rate or changes to any fee, all right, or any policy associated with the financial part of the agreement, then make sure you get a new financial agreement or enrollment agreement signed by the parent. So for example, they transition from one classroom to another, that changes their tuition amount. Make sure you get a new agreement signed. So pretty much you're going to get a new document signed every single year if you transition children and it changes. Now, this is probably one of the most important documents that needs to be signed by the parent prior to enrollment, that they understand and they agree to your financial arrangements. Once again, if they disagree or they refuse to sign it, then they don't start with you. I'm almost to the point where I would recommend that this document not only be signed, but also be notarized. All right. And that is a recommendation for you, especially if you are having issues with the parents following your financial guidelines. So paying their tuition on time, giving you adequate notice of withdrawal, paying your additional fees like late fees, late pickup fees, then you might want to consider having this document notarized. That's going to be very helpful if you run into a situation where you have a parent that leaves you owing a lot of money and you have to file a theft by service charge against them. Now, depending on your city or county, the ordinance may look a little different, so that's why you got to look in your specific area. But typically, if the parent owes you more than $750, you can file theft by service charges against them if they refuse to pay. But that would only be if the child was actually in attendance. Okay? So just a couple of tips on this particular document that I like to recommend. I know that the industry standard is that if a parent chooses to leave you, that you ask for a 2-week notice. We like to do a 30-day notice, all right? 2 weeks really doesn't give you enough time to refill that spot, because if you've got children on your waiting list and you call them up and say, hey, I have a spot, they're probably going to have to give a 2-week notice wherever they're at, and you might have a week or two that spot goes vacant. So I like a 30-day notice if they plan to withdraw. That's something for you to consider on your enrollment agreement. I got a question on Facebook Live. If you are a notary, can you notarize paperwork for your business? Technically, yes, you can. All right. So you can notarize the paperwork for your business. You just cannot notarize paperwork for you personally. All right. So technically, you can do that. All right. Again, Charlotte's got a question about the theft by service. That's going to be based on your local area, but the police department is not who you would file those charges through. So if a police officer told you that, Charlotte, they kind of spoke out of their line. Because this would be a civil matter that you would handle through civil court. But I've done this many times where we have filed this against a parent. So, but check in your local area. But if a police officer is telling you this, they're kind of talking out of line. That's not their jurisdiction. All right. Okay, so and then Amanda, I just answered your question as well. So yes, you can notarize business documents. You just cannot notarize personal documents right there. All right. So again, if you charge any additional fees, make sure that this is outlined in your enrollment agreement, and make sure that you go over these with the parent during the enrollment process. So during the tour, when you're collecting the paperwork, so late payment penalties, late pickup penalties, in-service fees, anything that you do like that. And let me just really quickly talk about late pickup penalties. make sure that the parent understands that, for example, your program is only licensed to be open from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. When a parent is late picking up their child, they are placing your license at risk. All right. So if you have a child in your program after 6:30, for example, you could have that child in care outside of your licensed hours. All right. And if this happens continuously, you could have an issue. So that parent needs to understand that when they're late picking up their child, they're placing your license at risk. In addition to the fact that you're having to keep a staff member there, people aren't getting to go home, they're invading into your personal time, blah, blah, blah. All right? And I like to encourage in your policy manual or in your enrollment agreement that if a parent is late picking up their child more than 2 times in a 6-month period, it could lead to dismissal. So I like to put a number of times and a time period on that infraction right there. On your enrollment agreement, also make sure that you put something about custody situations. Now, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more when we get to the admissions form, but as far as financial agreements are concerned, who pays the tuition is irrelevant. All right. Tuition is due, for example, tuition is due on Monday, it's late on Tuesday. If it's not paid by Friday, you're de-enrolled. Who is responsible for paying, whether it's mom or dad? None of your business. All right. Bottom line is, if it's not paid, you're out. All right. So we're not going to get involved in dad is supposed to pay that. Well, I gave the money to mom and mom is supposed to pay you, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to get into the middle of all that. All right. So we're going to follow the court order exactly as written. But as far as who, what, why, when, where is paying tuition in regards to custody, it's irrelevant. All right. So don't go down that rabbit hole with your families. Okay. Tuition is due on Monday or whatever day you designate, period. Okay. There you go. And then make sure that, once again, you outline if you do need to dismiss that child for non-payment, what are the terms that you're going to be looking at right there. Okay. All right, let's move on now to the admissions information. All right. Now, this is the most important document right here, and this is the document that when you're collecting the enrollment paperwork, you need to thoroughly go through this with the family and make sure that it is completed in ink. All right, so don't let them turn this in pencil. It needs to be completed in ink, blue or black ink. That is what is recognized in the courts. And that they cannot write not applicable. Okay, so, and I would verbally tell them this during the orientation or during the tour, is that you cannot write not applicable. Sometimes I will sarcastically say, if I didn't need the answer, then I wouldn't ask for it. Obviously, I need it, so that's why it's on the form, okay? Now, usually when they start writing not applicable or when they start leaving stuff blank is when the other biological parent, they're leaving that person off. So if you run into that situation where they leave one of the biological parents blank, that's when you need to request a copy of the court order. Now, here's basically all I'm going to say about this. And again, if you want additional information about custody issues, watch my webinar on custody issues. But here's basically what you need to know. In the absence of a court order, both parents have equal rights. So they can leave one of the biological parents blank all day long, all right? But if a parent comes in and they have a birth certificate and a picture ID, and they can prove that they are the biological parent, and you don't have a court order on file, then they have a right to access. Okay, So very good. Um, Danielle's asking, what cannot be left not applicable? None of it. All right. Every blank needs to be filled in. So let them know that you cannot accept a not applicable. Okay. So that's important right there. Now you might have noticed on the sample admissions form that I've got on the screen that I have responsible party 1 and responsible party 2, and then relationship to the child. Because we have so many blended family situations, I think the current data, and this was prior to the pandemic. I haven't seen data since January of 2020, but prior to the pandemic, 82% of the children in this country do not live with both natural parents. So, based on that information, you have to assume that 82% of your enrollment has a court order on file. So in order to make it easier and cleaner, instead of saying mother, father, we're recommending responsible party 1, responsible party 2, and then define your relationship to the child. Now, the court order is going to be very important right here on who has legal custody of that child. Now, a big recommendation that I have for you, and let's go back to the tour. All right. Most of you, whenever someone comes in to tour your program, you have them fill out a tour inquiry form where they write down their name, their address, their phone number, their email address, child's name and birth date, etc. Make sure you ask for a picture ID and verify that they really are who they say they are. I think you might be surprised at the number of people that come in for a tour and they're giving you a fake name. Y'all, this is scary. This is happening more than you realize. In addition to that, whenever you're collecting your enrollment paperwork, at this point, once again, I would collect a picture ID from both of the responsible adults. All right, make sure that the names that they are giving you matches the names that are on the enrollment form. Okay. Now, this is not a requirement, but this is a very strong recommendation. I recommend that you also ask for the child's birth certificate. Okay. I cannot recommend this enough. Okay. And you have every right to exceed. Okay, so you can definitely ask for this information. But you want to make sure that the names on the birth certificate match what is being put on the enrollment form. So you're going to ask for the birth certificate to verify the child's name, who is the biological mother, who is the biological father. Then you're going to ask for picture IDs to match that the person standing in front of you is actually that person. Or if it's not, do you have a court order giving someone else guardianship? And I know that this sounds like a lot, y'all, but again, 82% of the children in this country do not live with both natural parents. That's why this has become so important that you verify that people are who they say they are. Okay. Also, keep in mind 2.5 million children in this country are being raised by grandparents. So, keep that in mind too. It could be a grandparent that has custody of the child, that situation. All right. Now, when I say in the absence of a court order, both parents have equal rights, even if there is a court order on file, but the parent does not bring you a copy, so they fail to bring you a copy, all right, that would still be in the absence of a court order. So they can't just tell you, they got to show you. Okay. Now, I'm going to assume that most of you, you're not law enforcement, you're not attorneys. So we're not trained or certified in dealing with these types of situations. If this stuff comes up, they need to handle it at home. All right. Yes, if a child is legally adopted, then the parent that legally adopted that child would have guardianship. And you're going to have paperwork and typically a new birth certificate with that information on it. So that's where the legally adopted part comes in. Okay. Now, on the enrollment form, one of the most commonly cited minimum standards in the book, and we're going on 3 years in a row now that this is one of the most commonly cited items in the book, is the emergency contact. All right, now child care licensing just says that you need to have an emergency contact that can be contacted when the parent cannot be reached. All right, and you must have that person's name, address, and telephone number. The address is what people typically leave off. Okay, so when you're collecting enrollment paperwork, make sure they put the complete address of the emergency contact. I was just at a school yesterday where I saw some enrollment paperwork come in and the emergency contact address was left blank. So I pointed it out to the director and said, hey, you got a possible deficiency. If you accept this enrollment paperwork, they're missing the address. And sometimes, they'll just put the person's name and under the address, they'll put Dallas. All right. It has to be the complete address. And there is a very important reason for this. In the event that while the child is in your care, if both parents die, the state of Texas has to have a person designated that they can take that child to. All right. So that's why the emergency contact address and phone number is so incredibly important. Now, I'm sure the parents are probably going to say to you, oh, that's not going to happen. Well, you don't know that. All right. It's a crazy world right now, and who knows what could happen. But that's the reason for it. Now, I'm going to recommend that you exceed on this particular standard and not just ask for an emergency contact, but I'm going to recommend that you ask for at least 3 emergency contacts. All right. We've all been in that situation where we've tried to get a hold of the parent and we've called every number on the file and you can't get a hold of anyone. Well, the more people you have listed, the more opportunity you can get somebody. And not only that, but I recommend that you exceed and put that you need 3 local emergency contacts. All right. If I have a situation and I can't get a hold of mom, grandma in Florida does me no good. All right. So once again, your enrollment procedures, when you're collecting your paperwork and you're reviewing it, when you see that they're listing, out-of-state people for emergency contacts, we need to stop and have a conversation here. Hey, mom, I see that you put, your uncle in Oregon. If we were to have an emergency situation, he's not going to be able to help. All right, so let's think of someone local. I apologize if you are having technical issues. Hopefully the recording is recording well. So the address for the emergency contact is important. In the event that both parents die while the child is in your care, the state has to have a person that they can take the child to. Otherwise, the child will go into state custody, and we don't want that. All right. So there you go on that. The other big deficiency that we commonly see on the enrollment form is where it talks about name, address, and telephone number of the child's physician or an emergency care facility. All right. So on the child's physician or emergency care facility, they cannot write closest hospital. All right. So they have to actually put a physician's name, address, and phone number, or a hospital name, address, and phone number. So once again, part of your enrollment procedures, if you see that they write down closest hospital, we're going to need to say, hey, you got to put something down here. So I like to create a cheat sheet based on your area. What are some of the local pediatricians, their address and phone number? What are some of the local hospitals, address and phone number? And I just like to stick this piece of paper in the enrollment folder to kind of help them accurately fill out this form. And if it's a new family that just moved to the area, they really like this information. So it's a good resource for them right there. All right, let's kind of move on. I'm kind of watching our time here. On the statement of health, the main thing that I want to talk about with the statement of health is you've got three options right here. The statement of health is a written statement signed by a healthcare professional who has examined the child within the past year, indicating that they are healthy enough to be in group care. You can either get the signature from the healthcare professional upon enrollment, or if it conflicts with a family's beliefs or convictions, then they can sign off on that. Or it can be a signed statement from the parent listing the healthcare professional's name and address that has examined them within the past year, which is then followed by a signature from the healthcare professional within 12 months. I don't recommend that you do that last one. Get the signature from the healthcare professional up front prior to enrollment, and then you're done. All right? You don't have to get this signature every single year. It is a one-time deal. But if you allow the parent to sign this upon enrollment, now you're going to have to track when is it going to be 12 months, and I'm going to have to chase down this document with the healthcare professional signature. Most importantly, and the other reason why I recommend that you exceed on this standard, get the signature from the healthcare professional prior to enrollment. Many times we have seen where programs have allowed parents to sign this, and then 12 months later, when it was time to get the signature from the healthcare professional refused to sign it because due to a medical condition, that healthcare professional did not want that child in group care. All right. And we've actually seen this happen often. All right. You don't want to get stuck in that very uncomfortable situation where you've got a doctor saying this child is not healthy enough to be in care, and you've already had them for a year. Okay. And I'm sure you probably had a lot of drama over that year. So once again, I encourage you to exceed, get the signature from the healthcare professional up front, and then you're done. All right. So yes. Oh, thank you, Heather. The cheat sheet for the doctors and the hospitals, it works really well. And depending on the area that you're in, I'll just give you a little sidebar conversation here. We're going to go off path for a minute. If you're in a very competitive market, Heather, you might want to consider charging the healthcare professionals a little fee for them to be included on your cheat sheet. So if you're going to be referring parents to them, you probably want something in return. So, just something to consider if you're needing a little bit of extra money. Or you can just do it for free, whatever you choose. Brianna, no, if you get the signature from the healthcare professional, you do not have to get this signature annually. It is a one-time signature. I actually have a training on the most commonly misunderstood standards in the book, and this is actually one of them. Now, if you want to exceed, you can require this every year, but it's not required by licensing. It's a one-time deal. The only exception to this is if you close down during the summer, so you re-enroll your children like every September, and then you're closed in June, July, and August. If you're re-enrolling them every year, then you may need a new signature from the healthcare professional. I would have that conversation with your local licensing rep on their interpretation, but if you have continuous enrollment, you're good. The cheat sheet we were talking about was for the physician's name, address, and phone number, or an emergency care facility's name, address, and phone number. They cannot write closest hospital. So I recommend creating a cheat sheet with some of your local pediatricians' name, address, and phone number, and some of the local hospitals with their name, address, and phone number. Dee Dee, if you want to give me a call or shoot me an email, I'll be happy to coach you on your question, but that is not accurate. You do not have to have that signature every year. So, and I will be more than happy to help you with your licensing rep on that situation. All right. On immunization records, it is our responsibility to keep up with immunization records. However, I like to also put it in my parent policies and have this conversation during the enrollment procedures. That even though we are responsible for keeping up with immunization records, it is still the parent's responsibility to keep up with this. All right. It is still the healthcare professionals' responsibility to make sure their patients are up to date on their immunizations. It is not solely our responsibility. And I like to have this conversation with the parent. Sometimes when we run into a situation where we tell a parent, hey, your child is past due on a booster or whatever, you have until next Friday to get this done, or we're going to have to suspend enrollment. And then they throw a big fit and they're like, why are you just now telling me this? I don't have time to get them an appointment. Well, you're the parent. It's your responsibility to keep up with their immunizations, all right? So it doesn't solely come back on us. But make sure you have this conversation and you put it in your policy. So yes, we are required by licensing to make sure we have up-to-date immunizations, but it is still the parent and the healthcare professional's responsibility to also make sure that child is up to date. Okay. Now, again, if you have a family that due to their beliefs and convictions, they choose not to get their children immunizations, then obviously you would get the notarized affidavit in that situation, and that would be in the child's file, and that is accepted by child care licensing. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because we only have 12 minutes left in our workshop, but just know that this is a federally protected class. You cannot discriminate against someone for their beliefs and convictions. So that's all I'm going to say about that one. Otherwise, go back to my webinar that I have on understanding protected classes, and I go into more detail on that. Now, tuberculosis testing, TB testing, that is based on your local area. Child care licensing no longer regulates this. It's going to be your local health department. So you're going to check in your local area whether TB testing is required for your students and employees. And it's different all over the state. Okay, there's actually very few that require TB testing. Most cities and counties no longer require this, therefore you won't be required to do it. But it just depends on where you're at. So for example, I own and operate five programs, 2 after-school programs. So I have 7 buildings altogether. 3 of my buildings were required to get TB testing for our employees. The rest of them I'm not required. But my schools that are in Tarrant County were required. All right. So again, check in your local area. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that we covered in enrollment procedures, because this is a commonly missed item as well, is the food allergy emergency plan. If a parent comes in and during the tour or during the enrollment process and they tell you that their child is allergic to a certain item, then at that point you need to have a food allergy emergency plan completed and signed by a healthcare professional. Now that is the key part right there, is that it's completed and signed by a healthcare professional. So a parent cannot self-diagnose their child's allergies. This was a beautiful thing back in September of 2016 when this became a requirement, that half of the food allergies we had in our program were suddenly cured as soon as we were required to get a signature from the healthcare professional. It was amazing. Now, what should be included in your food allergy emergency plan? And again, y'all, this is so important when it comes to enrollment procedures that we get this information accurate. You need to have the child's name, the food that they are allergic to, signs of a reaction, and what first aid must be administered. And the fourth item is what is typically missed. All right. So what first aid must be administered? Call the parents, contact front office, okay? Give the child an alternative fruit. None of those examples are first aid. And I was just in a program earlier this week, and I saw a food allergy emergency plan, and that's exactly what was on it, was call the parents, okay? So it needs to be the child's name, what food are they allergic to, what are signs of a reaction, and what first aid must be administered. So again, having that food allergy emergency plan completed by the healthcare professional and signed, make sure that you've got all four of these items. So when you're collecting your enrollment paperwork, then review this with the parent. Make sure you've got everything you need. If you notice you're missing something, ask for the accurate information and complete information before you allow that child to start. If you don't have the signs of a reaction and what first aid must be administered, and you allow that child to start in your program, and then you do have a significant event, you're not in a good position, okay? And then we like to go above and beyond here as well. So create an allergy alert that is posted in the classroom. Now your food allergy emergency plan needs to be posted where food is prepared and where food is served. All right. But we don't actually post the food allergy emergency plan with the signature of the physician and all that stuff in the classroom. We kind of simplify it for the classroom. So child's name, what food are they allergic to, signs of reaction, what first aid must be administered with a picture of the child, and you can see a little sample there on the screen. There you go. And once again, all of these documents are located in our Child Care Survival Guide that is located on our website. All right, the last critical document that I want to review in our enrollment procedures, because once again, this is a very commonly missed item that is very, very important, is the infant sleep exception form. Especially now that as of 2021, we have new standards that if you get cited for any deficiency related to sleep safety, then not only will you be given an administrative penalty that you have to pay, but you also have to notify all of the parents in your program that you have been cited for sleep safety guidelines. We don't want that to happen, all right? So if you have a parent that comes in and says, my child has reflux and they have to sleep upright, or they have to sleep on their side, or whatever the situation may be, then you're going to have them take this infant sleep exception form to their healthcare professional, and the healthcare professional is going to fill it out and sign it, okay? Very, very important that you've got this. And you can download this form from Child Care Licensing's website. So if you go to Health and Human Services, go to Child Care Licensing, go to Documents or Forms, you can download this form right here. But like I said, this is a very commonly missed item or you have just a note that is written by the healthcare professional that does not have all of the required information on it. Now, if you do have them send in their own document, that's okay, as long as all of the required information is on there. So just match whatever you're getting from the healthcare professional to this form from licensing. And if everything's on it, then you're good to go. Most of the time it's not, it's incomplete. All right. So yeah, and Heather, the reason for the picture on the allergy alert is that when you do have a sub that comes into the classroom, or you have new teachers that are coming into the classroom, they may not know all of the children's names yet, or they're just getting familiar with the names. So that's why we like to put a picture. Now, again, make sure that it is a current picture of the child. So we need to update these, as needed. I was at a program here a while back doing an audit, and on the emergency release forms, they had pictures of the children, and it was a picture of the child when they were an infant, and the kid's now 5 years old. So, obviously we need to make sure we got updated pictures on some of these documents if that's what you're doing. All right. I got a question on the infant sleep exceptions. Are we required to accept a child with this in our program, or is it an ADA issue? So with the Americans with Disability Act, go back to my webinar on supporting children with special needs, and I kind of go into detail on what you need to know about the Americans with Disability Act. But this is actually a very good question from Helena. Obviously, we cannot discriminate against a person with a disability. We cannot exclude them from our program unless the presence of that child creates an undue hardship. And that would be if there is a risk, a direct threat, or a risk to the child, the other children, or the adults in the program. So whatever the special need or disability is, if it creates a direct threat to that particular child, the other children, or the adults, then they can be excluded at that point. Or if the disability creates a fundamental alteration to the program, meaning you would have to change your policies or processes in order to accommodate this child. If it creates a fundamental alteration to the program, then that would be an acceptable exclusion as well. All right. But if, in this case, you've got a child with an infant sleep exception form, if it is a reasonable accommodation, then at that point you would need to comply. Okay, so a reasonable accommodation we can typically comply with. But if it's a direct threat or a fundamental alteration of the program, then that could be an exclusion right there. So once again, if y'all want to go back to my webinar on supporting children with special needs, we go into some detail about ADA law on that particular workshop. Let me just read from my. So I'm just hang on. I'm trying to read a question here. If they are all three coming into the center, what do you put? So I don't think I'm understanding this question. If you have a child that does not require an infant sleep exception form, then obviously this would be not applicable. So the infant sleep exception form is only for only required if applicable. All right. I got Nancy's asking a question about the survival guide. Nancy, if you just want to send me an email with the date that you purchased it, I can let you know any updates that have been made since then. And if I have made any updates to the survival guide, then I'll be happy to send you those updates. Just email me with the date that you bought it, and I can tell you what we've updated. The Child Care Survival Guide is the only document that we sell that I'll give you free updates on. All right, so if we have made any updates, just let me know when you bought it. So shoot me an email and I'll be happy to help you with that. All right, so once again, all enrollment paperwork is completed and turned in prior to the child starting. If a parent comes in and they say, on Monday morning and they say, oh, we're going to go to the doctor on Thursday, we'll get the health statement to you then my response to that parent is, we'll see you on Friday. All right. But we're pretty strict on this, that a child does not start until all enrollment paperwork is turned in and completed. Once again, if a parent refuses to sign a document, then they don't get to start. All right. Even once they start in your program, if they refuse to sign any document, that would be grounds for dismissal. Signing a document is basically acknowledging that you were given the information. It's not an acceptance or an agreement once they've started in your program. So keep that in mind right there. All right. Yeah, so if the child does not have any infant sleep exceptions, then it would be a not applicable. Same thing with food allergy emergency plan. If a child does not have any food allergies, then that would be a not applicable item. Okay, so there you go. All right, so hopefully this was helpful to you in adopting and practicing some successful enrollment procedures, making sure that we have everything we need to be in compliance with licensing from day one. We've got lots of other important things to do. We should not be spending our time chasing documents. So the enrollment process should be short and simple and pretty easy. So hopefully this was some helpful information for you. All right, so your links to complete your online worksheet should be located on Facebook now, so you can refresh your browser or just go to the top of the page and you'll see the two different links to complete your worksheet. If you're going to pay with credit card, then you'll complete the worksheet paying with credit card. If you have established an online account with us, then you'll complete the worksheet using an online account number. All right. Don't forget, we have director and teacher workshops this weekend. So tomorrow, we're going to be doing our director workshop from 9 to 12, and that's going to be on 10 steps to moving past the pandemic. So I've been working on this topic for a while now. So it's going to be a good workshop tomorrow. Hopefully you can make it. But we're going to talk about 10 steps to moving past the pandemic and hopefully putting this thing to bed and how to move our business and our program forward with the challenges and obstacles and the new normal. So tune in tomorrow for that. And then on Saturday, our teacher workshop is going to be an introduction to STEM and the engineering design process. So once again, it'll be applicable for any age group, and that'll be once again from 9 to 12 right here on Facebook. No need to pre-register for either of those workshops. Just like today, you'll tune in on Facebook Live, and at the end of the workshop, they will complete a worksheet to get their certificate of completion. Okie dokie. All right. Awesome blossom. I look forward to seeing all of you very, very soon. Hey, we have a surprise coming very, very soon. We're about to make a big announcement, so stay tuned. Stay tuned. But I think we're about to announce a couple of things that are going to make y'all very happy. All right. I hope y'all all have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully tomorrow and Saturday. Otherwise, very, very soon. Thanks a lot for being with us today. Bye.